Hello, everybody. Ketshi1383 with Ketshi Gaming. Today, I thought I would actually do one of my longer videos as in a review, which I haven't been able to do since I did part 2 of Saints Row Reboot. Mainly because I got really busy due to coursework. And right now, it's the winter break, so I'm going to try and see if I can pump out a video or two in the next week or two, which is really fast. But let's see what I can do. I'm also going to try a new format. I'm going to try and keep it under 20 minutes. We'll see how I do that. To be honest, though, it's probably going to depend on the length of the game or the nature of the game in terms of its gameplay loop. So today, though, I thought I'd do Darktide, or I should say Warhammer 40k Darktide. So, this game is very similar to other games that have been released in the past. I think most notably is probably going to be Vermintide 2, which is also another Warhammer game. But I think if anyone hasn't played that, Left 4 Dead 1 and 2 are going to be the nearest thing because they're definitely very similar in that aspect. Now, I'm only very passively familiar with the Warhammer 40k universe, and I've only learned a little bit through osmosis from watching various YouTube videos, so I'm not well versed in the lore or anything like that, so please forgive me if I get something wrong or make a suggestion that might, I don't know, contradict the lore. So the plot in the game isn't exactly all that complicated. It takes place on a hive city of Teritium. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correct, but we'll give it my best try. On the industrial planet of Atoma Prime. You start off as a prisoner on a ship that just so happens to be conveniently located across from a heretic prisoner who is freed by a exploding suicide unit. You make your way through the ship and you save a very important member of the Inquisition, which allows you to join the Inquisition more or less as a cannon fodder sort of soldier to be used by the Inquisition. They have very brief cutscenes, and there really isn't that much of a plot, to be honest, at this point. So you don't have to worry about me summarizing that up other than me sort of briefly covering it now. So as you progress in level, you earn trust. Or I should say the levels are trust. At various trust levels, you'll interact with key members of the crew with small little cutscenes. Including one where there's a traitor on board. Eventually accumulating when you hit max level 30, at least currently the max level is 30, of the traitor being killed and you officially becoming part of the Inquisition. That's the plot right there. Nothing complicated in any shape or form. Now, unlike, let's say, Vermintide 2 or Left 4 Dead, you have classes in the game. I guess technically Vermintide 2 sort of did, and it was based around the character that you selected. This one, there is distinct classes. You have the Veteran, the Psyker, the Zealot, and the Ogrim. Your Veteran is the sharpshooter range character of the group, while the Psyker is sort of also a long-range character-ish, but also is very good for crowd control. The Zealot is your melee-based character, while the Ogrim is kind of your tankish character, but also a heavy damage dealer as well at the same time. Now, all of them can use both range and melee weapons, though. Some are better at it than others. And they each have distinct weapons. There are plenty of crossover in terms of the weapons that everyone can use, but some classes get specific weapons. Like the Zealot gets a two-handed chainsaw sword. The Ogren gets a shield and a club. The Psyker gets plenty of stabs and other things that allow them to channel their powers. And the Veteran gets some rifles and a very distinct sword that allows them to charge it with energy, which can cut through enemies like hot knife through butter. And I'm only briefly sort of pointing this out. I'm not going to go into detail of each class's specific weapons. The other thing you get to do is you get to customize a character. This is not really all that important. It's mainly surface level and doesn't really affect the game that I could tell, other than maybe some verbal exchanges amongst people's different characters. So the basic gameplay loop starts with you choosing a mission, or you can do a quick play and be put into a mission that's already going in order to help out other people who are currently playing but couldn't quite fill their ranks with human players. There isn't an option at this point to do solo games, unlike Vermintide. Unless you're in a strike party, and at that point you're playing with other people, which means that your ranks are going to be filled with bots if you're in a private game. Otherwise, you're going to have to play with people. Unless it's not very busy, then you will be supplemented with bots. There are ups and downs to both of those scenarios, or a combination of the two, because sometimes you can still have players but not enough, and you'll have some bots and some players. So I played all 4 classes, and the Veteran is definitely my favorite, mainly because it focuses on using ranged weapons, with the Psyker and the Ogrim being very close, and the Zealot coming in last. Mainly due to some of the other classes being better at ranged attacks, and to be completely honest, the Ogrim, from what I've played, kind of outshone the Zealot in terms of melee ability, even though that's the Zealot's key feature. So after choosing a mission, you go down and you progress through the level in whatever scenario you're trying to do. So far, in terms of actual mission objectives, there's quite a bit of repetition. The only difference is where this repetition takes place. And there aren't nearly as many maps as there are in Vermintide, and I suspect they're working on that to try and get that number up eventually. They've already added 2 new maps since I played when they initially launched it. But I hope they sort of expand the scenarios a little bit here and maybe take some of the aspects that I find a little bit more boring out of it, such as the data interrogators. I don't particularly feel that it's all that engaging, having to sit there and fight wave after wave of enemies, which sounds a little weird in a game where it comes in waves, but the way that the data interrogators work is that they constantly fail and then you have to go reset them, and it happens way too often, and it seems the most common scenario is why I don't really like it in particular, because I've done it so many times. Even on the newest map, it's several different scenarios of you attaching data interrogators and then just going through and fighting wave after wave of enemy, resetting it when it needs to. You then proceed with your compatriots going through the various hallways and other structures of the Hive City, fighting off waves of enemies. Sometimes you'll come across groups of them, other times they'll come up behind you or they'll rush you from ahead. And let's say, unlike Left 4 Dead, there are sort of different degrees of enemies in terms of what they send at you. You have your pox workers, which are just everyday citizens that have been infected with something and they're now just more or less mindless zombies. They're easy to kill and it doesn't take much to wipe out groups of them. Then they have a sort of next tier, that being guys that are more heavily armed and have more armor on them, and they take more damage to kill. You can tell by the clothing they're wearing. The Scabs, which is one of the 2, I guess, sort of different factions in the city, wear armor and a lot of metal, while the drags wear a lot of cloth that's yellow, followed by a third tier of units. Followed by a third tier of what I would consider the special units, similar to that of the Spitter and the Licker and the Hunter in Left 4 Dead, or the Hook Rat, or the other sort of special units in Vermintide. And there's varieties in these enemies due to the two factions of the Dregs and the Scabs, with the Dregs having more metal and more armor, making it a little bit harder to take them out from a distance. So you'll have shotgunners, gunners, ragers, trappers, snipers, and then you'll have Ogrim variants as well of some of those units. Reapers, which are gunners but really big guns, carried around by an Ogrim in armor. A Crusher, which is basically an Ogrim mauler that will pummel you if it ever hits you with its big, huge hammer. And then there's the fourth tier, which at this point only comprises of 2 units. That being the Beast of Nurgle and a Plague Ogrim. They're big, huge monstrosities that have the potential to wipe out your party, especially if they aren't paying attention to what they're doing or depending on the terrain. I definitely lost a group, including myself, fighting a Plague Ogrim on a bridge. There's enough diversity amongst the enemies that it doesn't become excessively repetitive when it comes to actual combat in the game. The only real thing I have a problem with are some of the objectives involving multiple points in which you have to use the data interrogators or scan for plague samples, which for me slows down the pace of the game and detracts from the combat, which I find more entertaining and fun than scanning plague samples. Now, let's talk about the visuals of the game. It is definitely very impressive with its... I know 40K is known for its cathedral-ish kind of aesthetics that the humans are known for, and you can definitely see it even from the ship that you start out in to the Hive City when you go down below, with everything being dark and bleak. And the light definitely helps enhance the mood of this game and the scenarios that you're in, to the point where I don't go anywhere if I don't have a flashlight, if I can help it. Some of the classes don't always get flashlights. Now, it's not to the detriment in the game in this case. You can still see well enough to be able to fight and do what you need to do, but it definitely enhances the mood of the scenario in the game. And there's a lot of detail everywhere. You can see the grunge and the grime and the decay. Not all of it due to the heretics of the city. It's just what happens over time. Mainly due to the nature that apparently they don't do proper maintenance, or they've lost the knowledge of how to build stuff. There's also times where you'll go towards the surface of the planet and you can see that they've totally destroyed the landscape of the planet, turning it into a desert, making it a living hell and impossible for life outside the Hive City. And the music and the sound effects in this game are pretty good as well. The music is definitely awesome, and it has this great timing of playing music when things start to pick up in terms of combat, enhancing the mood. I like the sound effects, especially in this game, from the sounds of the guns and the satisfying sort of flunk you get from melee weapons hitting flesh, or in some cases a slicing sound, but either way. Now, there is one thing I do want to address, and that is that the game is definitely not finished. You can literally go into the game and there's a section where you can enhance weapons, and there have features that are saying coming soon, on top of them adding levels, like I stated earlier, and weapons. This kind of detracts from it at this point in time, but it took me a while before I started getting a little bored with the game. And to be honest, I have a lot more fun when I'm starting to play with my friends because they started playing it with me. But for the most part, I'm definitely satisfied with this game and I'm having fun with it. And I kind of want to see what they're going to do with the game. I wonder if they're going to add orcs, because I really want to see how they're going to handle orcs, especially after playing Warhammer 40k Space Marine, where the orcs were a little on the cartoonish side. Now, there are some things that I do find negative about the game, and I already covered the repetition in some of the objectives, but some of the things that kind of detract for me at least, are the load times. Some of them can be kind of on the long side, but once you completely reload the game, it's usually pretty smooth from that point on. It's mainly when you first start the game is where you see it the most. And I have had a few crashes while playing as my psyker, while I've had friends also crash and then having to rejoin the game. And I feel like some of the melee damage in higher difficulties is a little out of proportion for the difficulty, and they keep nerfing the dodge function as well. Which also leads me to other scenarios in which they just spawn behind you. I have literally seen them do this, not spawn behind me, but spawn in front of me, and I'm almost 100% certain they do the same thing when it comes to being behind you. Even though you literally just looked in that direction, cleared everything, turned around, and the next thing you know, you're getting hit by something, even though you just cleared that part of the map. And something I guess it's sort of neutral is that you have a shield, and that shield is affected how close you are to your allies. If you're away from the group, it will deplete in a heartbeat and won't regenerate nearly as fast as if you're next to them. It's sort of a way to force you to stay together. But in some of these levels where you want to explore to look for things, let's say like med packs or scriptures or grimoires, you kind of need to split up to cover ground or you're going to be looking for a really long time. The other thing is bullets seem to be extremely disproportional when it comes to dealing damage to your shield. They will drain it in a heartbeat. Same for fire. And there are unscripted and scripted scenarios in which you can have your shields and your health drained in a heartbeat as a result. Now, I kind of want to briefly touch on playing with other people, in which case, yes, your mileage is going to vary. Sometimes you get an excellent group where you can take on enemies in a heartbeat. I mean, we killed a monstrosity in 20 seconds. Other times you'll get some guy that just keeps taking all the ammo, or another guy that will bother a demon host getting 2 of your members killed or himself killed. Then there's the bots. They're pretty good for the most part. Say for the most part because there are scenarios in which you need to do certain things in the game to earn a certain extra currency, like kill so many dregs with melee attacks. And the AI can be a bit of a pain in the butt when you are stuck with them because no one else is playing with you. They have this terrible tendency of being extremely good shots and somehow shooting around you, and I don't know how they do it. And I don't think it matters as much in this one versus, let's say, Vermintide and War Left 4 Dead when it comes to killing special units. So it's not too much of a bother. I do find it a touch irritating that they'll swoop in and get the last shot in even though you did most of the damage. I have had a few issues of AI getting stuck in elevators, causing me to have to go forward enough to pull them forward with me. And they have this thing where they won't immediately help the player. They'll focus on attacking the surrounding enemies first, leaving you to struggle on the ground by yourself as your health slowly ticks away, instead of just having one of them come and help you versus having all 3 of them just constantly attacking whatever's after you. So overall, this game is really fun, especially if you have friends. It is an amazing looking game with its dark, gritty, gothic atmosphere, with some really good music when it comes to fighting and sound ambience. Excellent sound effects for the weapons as well, and satisfying thuds with melee weapons. Some of the scenarios can get a little on the repetitive side, and they use them quite a bit, like the data interrogator. So I'm not sure why it's sitting at a 6 on Steam, but I'm playing it through the Xbox Live PC Game Pass, and other than maybe 1 or 2 crashes, I haven't had too much of an issue on the technical side. I do think maybe it's due to the fact that it wasn't quite finished as a possibility. I haven't really read any of the reviews, but it's a fun game, and if you have Game Pass, I would definitely give it a try. And unfortunately, it's not on the console Game Pass, at least not yet. And I tried looking for it and I didn't see it, but I haven't looked in maybe a couple of weeks, so it might be there now. So, keeping true to my word, I am trying to keep this under 20 minutes ish, and I've hit that mark where I think I've sufficiently described the game well enough, which I'm able to do due to the nature of this game. So, if you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching and have a good one.